So in the media, and you guys will hear a lot of people talk about fitness. It's kind of confusing because you can look at somebody and be like, wow, they look pretty fit. But is a visual ocular pat down ever going to really tell me anything about fitness? Is low body fat an indicator of fitness? No. I mean, if you can look at the bodybuilders on stage with Mr. Olympia, some of the most unhealthy individuals on the planet. So low body fat isn't. So visualization, and more importantly, like let's say we take a look at a car that's parked out there, looks shiny, looks great. Do you know whether or not that car is fast? Do you know if it runs well? No. Until you hear it start up and do something, we are not able to do anything other than make just observation. But what about athleticism? If you were to say, or you were to observe somebody and say, wow, they were extremely athletic, what does that mean to you? Can you define it? Can you quantify it? Is there a test for athleticism? No, the NFL's been trying for 30 years and they still can't figure it out. And the reason being is athleticism is based off of symmetry. We know it when we see it. So you guys know with good-looking people, for example, you can see somebody good-looking guy or girl walk in, and instantly you know whether or not they're good-looking. Why? Why is that? It's actually symmetry. So, beauty's based off of this idea of Pythagorean theorem, and you can go and you look at symmetry. But for what we know for athleticism is you can see somebody move. You can watch an Odell Beckham Jr. run down the sideline, rotate and catch a ball and keep moving without breaking a stride, or reach back and do some amazing catch, and you think to yourself, kind of hold your breath and think, wow, did I just see that? Did that person do what I thought they did? God, that person is such an amazing athlete. That display of athleticism was just such, I felt blessed just to see it. That's the piece. And there is a distinction between them. And are they mutually exclusive? They are not. You can be an incredible, you can be incredibly fit, you can have a high level of fitness, and be the worst athlete on the planet. You can be one of the most amazing athletes on the planet and have the lowest level of fitness, where you're winded walking across this stage. So, if you have athleticism, and you have fitness, but then you have athleticism like the ultimate good-looking person in the room, how do you marry the two and how do you define them? And this has been the world's biggest debate because, as I always say, the best trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that fitness was the same as athleticism, and it's not. I played with extremely fit guys that never even got off the bus in the NFL. And I played with some phenomenal athletes that if you met them, you would think that they were probably driving a beer truck, not in good shape. So let's start by defining this, right? Let's break it down a little bit. So what is fitness? When I think, and this is a pretty open-ended question, and you can ask everybody, everybody's going to have a different response for a very good reason. Now, if we look at biological fitness means the ability to survive to a reproductive age, to find a mate and produce offspring. Basically, the more offspring an organism produces during its lifetime, the greater its biological fitness. So, I have 3 kids. Does anybody here have 4? Who's got 4? Somebody got 4 kids? You got 4. Anybody got 5? You got 5. Who's got 6? You got 6. Okay, how many? 7? You got 6 kids? Anybody here got more than 6 kids? Fittest dude in the room. Right, so there's the definition of fitness. Every single sports scientist on this planet, when they write their final dissertation, when they write a paper, they define fitness because it allows a framework for the rest of their information. Websters Dictionary. The quality of being suitable to fulfill a particular role or task. So that's a little bit different than the biological definition, right? The ability of being suitable to fulfill a particular role or task is their definition of fitness. Okay, in Webster's Dictionary. CrossFit, a little company that I came on to work with a number of years ago. Guy Greg Glassman, through some observation and some testing, he theorized that their definition of fitness was increased work capacity over broad time and modal domains. What does that mean? Looks like a bunch of jargon, right? Increased work capacity, your ability to do work, to do something. So if you can increase the amount of work you can get done, broad time, different time domains from up to a minute up to hours, right? So different time domains. and modal domains, which would be different implements. So your ability to execute movements in different time domains with different things faster over time should theoretically result in increased fitness. So I'll give an example. I moved to Texas. I grew up, like I said, middle-class white kid in Torrance, Southern California. And our idea of yard work was I'd help my dad wash cars and do a bunch of little stuff. So we sell everything. I moved to Texas, and legitimately I live on a ranch. I had to put up fencing, and invited a couple of the guys over that work for me, and we had to dig fence posts. So we're out there. It's probably about 90 degrees. We're out there digging these fence posts. As we're going through, pulse hole digger digging. I dig 3 of these things, and I'm actually destroyed. I am smoked to the point where I'm like, you know what, we need water, we need shade, something's wrong. And just then my neighbor drives by, and my neighbor's about 60. He's been doing dirt work his whole life, excavator, just a very, very successful guy. I mean, just, done it all. And he pulls up, he goes, screaming at us like, what are you guys doing? We're digging fence posts. He's like, you guys are terrible at it. And of course, he's the old neighbor that drives by and tells you all the things you're doing wrong all the time. You guys might have that neighbor. So he turns around, goes back, and he gets a couple of his guys that work for him. He brings them down, and these 2 guys are, later 50s Mexican dudes, big stomachs, real, what you would expect to be in good shape. And so they kind of jump out of the car, and they see us, and they kind of scoff, and they come over, and they're like, watch this. And I watch these 2 middle-aged Mexican dudes work us into the dirt. So it's me, it's a couple of my guys that are all super fit. We train, we lift weights, all ex-college athletes. And I watch these 2 out-of-shape Mexican cats literally work us into the dirt. They dug all of those fence posts, and probably, for every 3 we dug, they dug 10. Now, I don't have a lot of ego about things. I have a lot of pride, but I don't have ego, and I will always take a lesson. And I'm watching these guys, and what were they? They were efficient. They didn't waste a lot of motion. They were extremely methodical in how they did it, and they worked very well with each other. And as I got done, I watched these guys and realized for the last 40 years of their lives, these guys have been digging holes. Now, here I am thinking I'm going to use all this strength and muscle and size and rotation and all the key things that I'm going to use that I've developed in my NFL career. But at the end of the day, how do you get good at digging holes? By digging holes. And that piece of saying, you know what, attention to detail and how it goes is just a little example of, even though my fitness and my work capacity might be pretty good, when it comes to digging holes, those guys crush me every day. Now, if we had to run or do something or lift weights, I don't know, those guys would probably beat me too. So what we've seen is we've seen 3 very different definitions of fitness. So we've seen, the biological, we've seen Websters Dictionary, we've also seen CrossFit. Now, the one thing which is interesting about this, and what nobody talks about, is fitness is personal. That's it. There's no definition. There's nothing that somebody's going to tell you. You can't go down to your local gym and ask somebody, say, hey, I want to make me fit. Great. Tell me what your fitness is needed for, right? Do you know what you're training for? Do you know what you want to use the fitness for? Can you give me a real-world example of what you need to train for? If you said to me, I want to be fit enough to be able to dig 100 fence posts, in 100-degree heat in Texas on a Tuesday, do you think I would take you to the gym and do that? No. We'd probably start with digging holes, and we would get good at it. But if you told me I want to train for a lifetime, I want to be healthy, and I want to do the amount of work on the front end, so that when something happens to me later in life, I have developed the strength, the stability, the mental toughness. I've done the body of work to survive the task. Because here's the deal. I mean, the reality of this is something's going to happen to everybody. Nobody is going to live some charmed life, and then at the very end, you just kind of, float away. Something bad is going to happen. You're going to fall, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to get sick. And the only way you're going to survive these little whether it be a canyon or a small bump, is if you've done the amount of training on the front side to survive these tasks. And, I see this with my own parents. Constantly, like I said, my mom wants to walk 10,000 steps. My dad didn't want to do anything. And when all of a sudden the task got the task that was thrown at him became too great, all of a sudden he wasn't strong enough to make it. And I almost wish, after 20 years of harping on him every single day, I wish he'd listened on the front side because he'd still be here today. And that piece is one of those things where it doesn't matter how good you are or what you do. If you can't save the people close to him, then you got to reevaluate it. But being able to discuss fitness as this personal item and helping each individual make that decision and then start moving towards that goal, and more importantly, finding a plan of attack for it. A lot of people are in for a penny or a pound, but do you have a goal? Is there somebody there that has your best interest to be like, hey, this is where we're going to start, this is where we're going to finish, this is how we're going to measure progress, and I'm not going to fail you. And that's the key to it. And then understanding that fitness needs change over a lifetime. What I needed at 26 years old is not what I need at 41 years old. I need more sleep now. Like I said, I got three, twin girls and a little boy, and I'll tell you this, I never realized, I wish I had known how important sleep was earlier in my life, because I probably would have slept as much as I could. Because once I had kids, that just went away. So, and like I said, the secret is knowing when and how to change and how to pivot. Now, the interesting thing is, people always go, well, I go to the gym. Well, what does that look like? Well, I go to the juice bar and have a juice and talk to some people, and then I go home. And then I go look at my machine that has, a bunch of dust on it and some clothes. No, having a plan of attack, and it doesn't matter if it's 10,000 steps going out and playing, it's literally staying active and doing the things that you enjoy. Because here's the secret in life. If you do things that you enjoy, you will do them more, right? Why don't people eat better? Because the bad food and the stuff you shouldn't eat tastes so much better. And you're like, I know, like those cookies and all the stuff they had over there, it looks great. And if I sit there and go, man, I'm gonna eat this stuff, then you know what? It might not be the most advantageous, but at the end of the day, that's the roadblock. You're like, why couldn't just sitting on the couch, hanging out, or having a drink, or eating this food be better for me? Well, that's the crux of life. So this is really where I live. And I thought about this for a number of years. That quote that you see there, or that definition, is my definition of athleticism. So much like Websters Dictionary and the Biological and Greg Glassman, I figured if I needed to train my athletes and train my population, whether it be young, heavy hitters, or even my advanced age people, I needed to be able to have a model and a way to describe and explain athleticism. Because what did I say? It's next to impossible to define, but you know it when you see it. So just through observation and really the last 30 years of my life, having this kind of seed in my mind, I was able to define athleticism as the ability to seamlessly and effortlessly combine primal movement patterns through space to accomplish a known or novel task. Now that's a lot of words, but I'll break it down for you. So the ability to seamlessly and effortlessly. So seamless and effortless, to make it look easy. Like we said, we watched Odell Beckham Jr., you're watching the Super Bowl, you're watching any type of major sports, and you're watching these athletes do things, and it looks easy. You watch a guy in the NBA go for a dunk, and it looks so effortless when he jumps and he extends and he goes. And you think to yourself, how could somebody do that easy? And we realize that the key hallmark for athleticism is seamless and effortless. They're able to transition the ball into the hoop to where you don't even see it hitch. It looks simple. The ability to seamlessly and effortlessly combine primal movement patterns. All right, this is really the foundation of the training and really the foundation of everything that we do within our bodies. So as you can see my little people down there on the other side, what I want you to think about, and we'll look at like a charts or planes on a graph, X, Y, and Z axis. If you see that X axis where it cuts me here, and the analogy I'll kind of give is if this is a steel spike, and I were to drive it through one hip and out the other hip, and I were to rotate on this steel spike, I'm effectively doing something which looks like X-axis, or what we call hinging, or what you would see in terms of squatting. Usually the feet are here, and you hinge at the waist. Now, if I were to draw this same steel spike down the top of my head, down through, out the bottom, and I would rotate on the steel spike this way, I would be what's known as stepping, right? Z-axis, if I were to drive a steel spike through my belly, out through my low back, and I were to rotate on this, I would do what's known as stepping up. Now, realistically, our lower body can only do three things. We can X, Y, and Z axis. We can step, we can lunge, and we can squat. That's it. And what we know in terms of athleticism is the ability to seamlessly and effortlessly tie together X, Y, and Z axis to go out there and perform a task. So the analogy I kind of give, and hopefully I don't have enough room here, but if you watch a linebacker playing football, he starts in a hinged position, ball gets snapped, he takes a step, which he'd go from X to a Y. A guy comes at him and he hurdles him, so now he goes to Z, puts his feet back here to make a tackle and back to X. So when you look at all human movement in terms of the lower body, it's just a combination of X, Y, and Z axis. And your ability to tie together X, Y, and Z axis is what we know is athleticism, a lot like a computer code. So you just see all the different pieces, ties it together, and we know that the program works. The upper body has 4: vertical push, vertical pull, horizontal push, and horizontal pull. So based off of this model, our body can only perform 7 tasks. So if we can only perform 7 tasks, would it make sense that I should begin to train those 7 tasks and develop proficiency and strength and flexibility and motor programming and skill in those 7 movements? So then all of a sudden, when something happens and I have to use my fitness or my athleticism to accomplish a task, now all of a sudden I've developed strength. And where injury really comes from is not from necessarily a weakness. It comes from actually a strength. So one side is stronger than the other. Now all of a sudden I overreach with that strong side, and that one always tends to be the one that's injured. So now we look at developing these pieces and developing what I call primal proficiency in these pieces. Now, this information is great for you guys, but I go in and I teach the same stuff to, like she said, Olympic gold medalists, professional athletes, and the US military for the Army and also for Navy SEALs. So you would think that the Navy SEAL population, elite warfighters, you see them on TV, would be really good athletes. Do you guys think that's an accurate statement? No. What they are is they are some of the most technically proficient individuals that are really good at suffering. Right? They can suffer more than you and I together. But what happens is because you can mentally will yourself through something, a lot of times they will not apply this information because they can just get it done. So when we take a step back and we get these individuals to get stronger, move better, and we start giving them athleticism, and we start moving them down what I call the athleticism continuum. Now, this is another concept that I worked on for a number of years. And the idea is that every single individual on this planet starts on this athleticism continuum somewhere. Now, where you start is based off of 3 things that I mentioned earlier: genetics, geography, and opportunity. So I'm 6'6", right? I was 6 foot, 165 pounds by the time I was 14 years old. Left high school at 17. I was 6'4", 240, 250. 2 years into college, I grew another 2 inches and put on another 30 pounds. And then I was 300 plus pounds when I left college. I squatted 600 before I was 20. I benched 500 when I was 21. I ran a sub 4 940. I could vert 36 inches. So pretty good for a white boy, right? Pretty good athleticism, and went on in 100 career starts, 10 playoff appearances, and did my job for a long time at a high level. So I had some genetics involved in this. I also had the opportunity. My older brothers both played football. I got into fighting as a young age. I was always strong. When I went in the weight room, for some reason, I got stronger faster than other people. Does that mean that maybe my central nervous system was wired up a little bit different? Probably. I've always been physically strong. I was always a big kid, and always was able to move pretty well from it. Genetics, geography, opportunity. I had the opportunity to do these things, had the genetics. I grew up in Southern California, and football was what we did. And more importantly, if my brother hadn't got his butt kicked that day, we probably would have never got into fighting stuff. Now, where you start on this athleticism continuum is based off those 3 factors. Now, everybody's not going to be the same. But once you start moving this way as you start developing athleticism. And we defined athleticism as the ability to seamlessly and effortlessly combine primal movement patterns through space to accomplish a known or novel task. So, this athleticism continuum can extend for a lifetime if you understand the components of athleticism, which we discussed. Now, what's really fascinating with this is that straight line ends up looking like a downhill curve, or more importantly, just starts extending and getting faster as we add competition into it. So think about that as kids, right? When you guys were younger, you played sports, you competed on teams, you did things that were competitive, and your athleticism was greater because another individual was forcing you every single day to be your best. All of a sudden, we realized when competition stops, what happens to your trajectory and, more importantly, your progression on the continuum? It slows. Why? I don't have to be. I don't have to be great. Nobody's testing me daily. Nobody's forcing me to look bad. And I'll tell you this, fear of getting beat, and more importantly, shame, is a major, major, major component in the NFL. Right? I had this jersey on, and my name was on the back. And that name wasn't just my name. That's my mom's last name. It's my dad's last name. It's all my brothers. That's anybody that ever went to school with me that was like, I beat that kid up in 3rd grade. That kid was a jerk to me. That guy sat next to me. Every single person that I ever knew saw that Welbourn on the back of my jersey. And so because of that, every person knows whether or not I got called for holding or had a great block or whatever it is. So because of that, that's the type of things that get you up at 6 or 5, 6 in the morning. You wake up, you pop out of bed, and you think, I got to go and I got to bust ass at the gym today. Why? Because there's somebody out there who didn't like me that's going to be like, I knew that guy was no good. And I got to go out and I got to show every single person. So shame, personal pride, and that's what I always said. I don't have a lot of ego. My dad told me a long time, egos killed more people than cancer. Right? But have a lot of pride in who you are, that name on your back, so you get up each day and you give your best. So what we observe with the athleticism continuum is as competition goes away, all of a sudden it slows down. So what do we have to do to continue to develop athleticism through a lifetime? We got to continue to compete. So how do you compete? Now, obviously, you don't get to go play in the NFL. I don't get to do that anyway. But you as individuals have to find something you're competitive at. And it doesn't matter if it's walking 10,000 steps faster than somebody. You have to find something that allows you to continue to progress so that you're training for an end goal. What do we say? Working out's just getting sweaty? Athletes train for a lifetime. And you guys as individuals, now that you know this information, I'm tasking you with this. I'm tasking you guys to find what you're training for, to figure out what the end goal is, move towards it, and then add, and whether or not people, I love competing with people that don't even think that we're competing. Like my brother and I have played ping pong since I was a little kid. Anytime we see a ping pong table, we play. My brother beats me and has for years. And he just figures we're playing a friendly game. It's not friendly. I live and die with that ping pong deal to the point where I see it and I still get butterflies like I'm going to play in an NFL game. Now, if we can move through this and we can continue to develop athleticism, we can effectively push back the sands of time. What do we say? Lack of movement, lack of diet ends up being 80 to 90% of all the sickness that we have going on in this country right now. Type 2 diabetes. You guys know what type 2 diabetes is? Your body is no longer sensitive to insulin. Why is that? Too much insulin, too much exercise, 100% preventable. Disease of carbohydrate. So a lot of the things that you guys are countering, they talk about, but yet what does our medical community say? You might need to exercise a little bit more. Go walk your 10,000 steps. Maybe eat this or this. What do they say? No, don't change your lifestyle. Just take this drug. But that's what we've done. Everything that we do in this country is what? It's just putting a Band-Aid over the check oil light on your car. Now, how many of you guys would put electrical tape or a Band-Aid over the check oil engine light in your car? That are men, not women. Because that's something a woman would do. Or my wife would... My wife, things go, lights pop off on her car, and she'll be like, hey, these lights are gone. I'll get in them, and I'll be like, so what are we going to do? I'm like, we're going to take it in. She's like, oh, can we take it in next week? I'm like, no, we got to take it in now. So I go and I usually get her car, but that's my job as her husband. I got to take care of that stuff, so I'm happy to do it. All right, so how do we attack it? How do we continue to push back the hands of time, or the sands of time? Well, as we age, one thing happens. We start losing mitochondrial density. Mitochondria is the energy that transfers between cells, and that's the energy. So we start losing density of that energy. How do we continue to develop density, and how do we maintain density as we age? Basic aerobic work. So developing a basic aerobic platform. What does that look like? Getting out and moving. That's not max heart rate. 70%, that's just getting out and walking for 20 minutes 3 to 4 times a week. That's it. If you can get out and you can walk, you can develop an aerobic base and effectively fight off the hands of time and really can keep mitochondrial density. Hypertrophy, muscle. I'm sure you guys go to the doctor and what do they talk about? You're losing bone density, you're losing muscle mass as you age. Why is that? Wolff's Law, right? Our bones get stronger, our body reduces to stress. So being able to continue to stress the body in such a way that you can continue to drive muscle mass. People that carry more muscle mass do not age as fast and end up fighting off sickness and illness much better. So they can actually look and towards the people's lives as they've gone through certain problems as muscle mass declines, they can look at a percentage of muscle mass lost over time and know that when the end is near. So being able to continue to fight this and really fight for this thing called hypertrophy, which is based off of doing movements that continue to stimulate the muscle and continue to get them to grow. But the problem is that if we start this fight at 60 or 70 or 80 years old, our ability to do this is diminished. So what we need to do is put a plan of attack together for a lifetime where now we're forcing these over time so that when we get to this part, we don't have as big a gap to cover. But can you do it? Yes. Anybody tells you can't gain muscle in 60, 70, 80 years old doesn't know how to do it, and they don't know how to necessarily continue to drive adaptation because we can do it over a lifetime. The next one is max motor unit recruitment. So now how do you continue to get your motor units to fire? So we use little tricks. We use things called EMS, like the power dot unit that we help develop. What it does is it gets max motor unit recruitment through putting pads on the body. You guys might have used it at the PT, but it's pretty advanced and we use it with a lot of our athletes. And the reason being is, how many motor units does an individual use in a given training session? We don't know, but we know when we use the pads, we can get 100%. So I know for my parents, we use it 3 days a week, and I know things like, man, my feet don't hurt. I feel so much stronger. I wasn't able to, when I took something out of the car, I wasn't able to rotate, but now I'm able to do it. And what I really look for is real examples. I'm not interested in body fat or all this other stuff. I'm like, can you do something today that you weren't able to do in the past? And to me, that is by far the best, indicator that we're necessarily moving to where we need to go. Like I said, mitochondrial density. The best strategy for slow twitch, cytochrome C uplifting turned out to be running at about 60 minutes per workout at 70 to 75% VO2 max. Now for most individuals, if you guys were to go out and run 70 to 75%, and when you look at like heart rates, but for the most part, if we can just get people to build an aerobic base, all of this stuff comes into focus. Increased hypertrophy, like we talked about, basic barbell movements, primal patterns, rep ranges 3 to 12. And this might be even as simple as just sitting in your seat and standing back up a few times. And once it gets easier, then finding a way to load it, as much as just saying, hey, I'm going to hold something, and finding ways to progress this. But a lot of this is finding individuals to take you on this journey. And then a big thing that we've been using a lot with our athletes, which is called blood flow restricted training, which if you guys get on, you can look up BFR, and we use some bands through a company called Katsu and also called Be Strong, where they end up occluding the muscle and they get blood to pool within the muscle, and we can really drive adaptation that way. We use it for rehab and for a lot of our older athletes. Max motor recruitment, priming the central nervous system through accentuated eccentric contractions. Now there's 3 muscle contractions, right? You think about muscle shortening would be a concentric, muscle holding would be eccentric, and muscle lengthening would be eccentric. Now the eccentric portion of a movement is 3 times more damaging than a concentric. So if you think about where most people end up getting hurt, is usually in some form of eccentric load. So as you're sitting down, not necessarily as you're standing up. So you can really start kind of concentrating on these different movement patterns. So these are just some of our take actions. You can find more information about me at Power Athlete HQ, power.bfast, and then also probably the single greatest piece of technology that I've ever used in terms of health, I think, is a CPAP. I don't know how many of you guys have sleep apnea. I had a client that had sleep apnea, and they ended up getting a CPAP, and they were kind of complaining about it. So I hit up my doctor. I got one prescribed. I got one, and my sleep, fantastic. I'm at the point now, and he goes, you guys, especially with kids and whatnot, I don't really care how the sleep comes. I just want the best return for the least amount of input. If I'm going to get 6 hours of sleep, I want to be able to sleep all 6 of those hours. And for me, just using that rest med and the CPAP was huge. The other one in terms of supplements was 5 grams of creatine monohydrate daily. Like we talked about mitochondrial density, ATP, creatine, I believe every single human being on the planet should be taking some form of supplementation with creatine. It increases neurocognitive and stays off Alzheimer's and dementia, helps improve blood sugar, and also gives energy for the cells. So something to look for. So, all right. Let me go back to this one. All right, so any questions? All right, rock and roll on them.
Okay, y'all, we're going to take questions, and remember to wait for the mic. So Christy will be in the back, and I'll be in the front. This gentleman has his...
Man, you guys didn't like to comment about my wife hiding the check engine oil light, huh? You guys are a tough crowd. Don't tell me you guys have never ignored that sucker.
You mentioned the 3 motions of a movement and one being more damaging and timing, but you didn't really go into how you should do those.
Well, the idea comes down to how you should execute movements. So if we get into like a primal pattern, like an X, Y, and Z axis, and just basically a squat, to be able to move through that plane of motion, you're going to have to be able to do some form of eccentric and concentric. Now that's going to come back to patterning and what we know as efficient movement. A lot of times people don't really know how to do these things, like how do you squat? So if I'm going to sit in front of a chair and how do I set up to squat, usually my feet are going to be shoulder width apart. Why is that? It's the most stable position, right? If you were to look at my legs, you see a little pyramid, a little triangle, right? The longest surviving structure on the planet is a pyramid. Why? Big wide base, goes up to a top. If you look at every ancient structure on this planet, the longest surviving is always a pyramid. It just so happens that we, in that same position, are much stronger. As I go to squat and sit back, I hinge, I sit back. I don't just buckle my knees forward, but I sit back like I'm sitting on the toilet or into a chair. My knees end up tracking over my toes with my knees slightly over my insteps. And as I sit down, I work to control. How many of you guys, when you go to sit down, start to bend your knees and then just pull the ripcord and fall? Okay. Okay. So, why is that? That is one of the definitive signs of aging. So your ability to control your body and your central nervous system through a full eccentric load becomes one of the signals for people aging. So I can watch somebody sit down and I can be like, man, you're way too young to sit down like that. You know, how many people do you know just kind of like reach back and hope to God it's there and then just buckle? So as you do it, I want you guys, when you think about this, when you leave here, when you're going to get in something, you're back at your house, I want you to look and think, okay, I got my feet shoulder width apart. I'm going to push my hips back. I'm going to keep my torso up, and I'm going to sit, and I'm just going to try to control my butt all the way to the ground, all the way to the chair, and I'm going to touch it, and I'm going to stop. The next time I do it, I want you to try to do the same thing and then stand up. And I want you to really focus on where the knees are, how you're doing it. Your first engagement for the squat should always be hips back. But a lot of people, what do? They just buckle their knees forward. So when you think about this idea of hinging, the hinge doesn't start at the knees, it starts at the hips. So hinging and just all these positions, and what you can do is if you can effectively learn to not only master these movements, but then find a way to load them. I had a really interesting observation. My first year in the NFL, I came in, I started as a rookie, and at the end of the first half of my first NFL career, I ruptured my patellar tendon. So I thought I got shot from the 5th row, which in Philadelphia could have happened. I remember I'm laying down and on the ground, and I'm like on the ground going like doing this, and I thought I was bleeding because I got shot. They took me in, carted me in, they cut my pants off, and my kneecap was sitting about 3 inches too high to the right. And the doctor walks in, looks at my knee, and his eyes get big, and he goes, well, never had anybody come back from that injury. Your career's over. And the dude walks out. And I'm like, this is my first NFL start. Like, I just got here, and now my career's over. So I went home and rehabbed, or they did surgery. I didn't get out of bed for 3 weeks. I didn't walk for 3 months. Couldn't bend my knee for 3 months, and I started rehabbing. What was interesting was I couldn't play. But what I could do is I could watch. So I watched film. And after watching hundreds of hours of film, because single 23-year-old guy living in Philadelphia, no family, nothing, from California, it was cold, and I just sat and watched film. And I had this incredible epiphany observation, was that the person that was able to maintain good posture longer in terms of an NFL snap was the person that won the most. And so I figured, I'm like, man, if I can just learn the technique and basically enforce my will upon the other person where I get them out of their groove faster than they get me, then I can probably win. Now, the good part of this story is I end up coming back the next year, coming in and starting 16 games and going on and basically having the rest of my NFL career. But the lessons that I learned in me having to relearn all movement, because it had just been easy, right? I can just do this stuff. I can just play. All of a sudden, you take everything away from me where I can't bend my knee, and I have to be forced to learn things from just basic level. All of these pieces started coming in play, and I had to create a system because I realized nobody was going to do it for me. There was no doctor, there was no physical therapist, there was no strength coach that was going to be able to rebuild me the way I needed to do it. And it just took an analytical approach, and much of what you heard in the talk and what you've seen in, for me over the last 10 years of my NFL career comes from that very, very dark time in my life where I realized that there's a blueprint for efficient human movement based off of athleticism. And if I can master it, you can master it for a lifetime. Cool.
Another question? Any other questions?
The slide about the aerobic capacity, if you have someone that obviously can't run at that VO2 max, would any aerobic, sled drag, rowing, anything function?
Yeah, and ideally, that slide, but really when it goes back to is an idea of like 70% heart rate and suspended activity. So we think about aerobic being with oxygen and aerobic being without, but really just working for 20 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week, just within that 70% heart rate. And the way you find your 70% heart rate is you take your 220 minus your age, 70% of that, and for a lot of people, it's 120, 130, 140 beats a minute, which isn't very high. You don't have to necessarily work at the highest levels. So just being able to throw on a heart rate monitor, or I have like a little whoop band here, and being able to monitor my heart rate has been huge in terms of not only fat metabolization, but helping blood sugar. I had a diabetic client, and whenever they would, their blood sugar would spike out, we would just end up having them do some form of aerobic work, something known as non-mediated glucose uptake, where as you exercise, all of a sudden, blood sugar starts falling. So there's a way to control blood sugar with just aerobic exercise, which instead of having to take your pills or shoot up, ended up being his way how he controlled all of his blood sugar. So just being able to get out and do anything, and that might be just going out and trying to walk your 10,000 steps and be smart. Yeah.
With blood flow restricted training, what is the premise behind that? Is that just tiring the muscle out more quickly or increasing muscle metabolites, or?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. It's pretty fascinating. What we're able to do is by occluding the muscle, and what happens is you occlude venous blood flow, but you don't restrict arterial blood flow. So blood will flow in, but the blood tends to pool. Once it pools, it actually ramps up growth hormone and androgen sites like thousands of times. There's this thing called myostatin, and I don't know, I should have a slide for this, but you guys seen on TV those massive muscle bulls? You guys ever seen that? Google myostatin bulls. They're these 3,000-pound, overly developed bulls that are so big that when they go to mate, they actually break the back of the females. They are a complete abnormality, and they're a genetic accident in a lot of ways. And there is a natural kind of buffer within our system. It's like a governor in terms of muscle growth. And it's called myostatin. And it's released, and that's what kind of blunts muscle growth and hypertrophy. There's been, I think, reports of about 2 people on this planet, and they've actually been able to breed some animals that are able to block the myostatin gene, and they gain muscle at a much greater rate than those others. So the effect of the pooling of the blood in that hypoxic situation ends up creating some anti-myostatin blockers. It raises androgen and growth hormone, and then it also fatigues fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers at the same rate. So your body goes through this patterning when you change, and you fatigue motor units at a certain rate. So you have to kind of go through this deal to kind of hit those type 2 fibers. In terms of the hypoxic, in terms of the blood flow restricted training, you can also get to that deal. So now what it looks like is it's not really necessarily what the weight that you have in terms of volume and intensity. It just matters that you're able to get the blood flow to pool. So for athletes that are injured that might not be able to handle a heavy load, we can use the blood flow restricted training to drive adaptation with even light weights. And the individual, I think I got his picture up. Let me show you. So I learned this from the guy who ended up creating it. It was a guy named Dr. Sato, who has a company called Katsu Global. Dr. Sato is 74 years old. Looks pretty good at 74. I think he might dye his hair. It's pretty black. I got no proof on that, but the dude is a former bodybuilder and is in phenomenal shape and uses this exclusively for his training. So it's known as blood flow restricted training, KATSU. You can look it up and there's a link for it, KATSU Global. Pretty amazing deal, especially for rehabbing athletes. We use it, but I've also used it extensively with our older athletes and my parents and different people.
Okay, we'll take one last question. We're kind of running
Yeah,
over
I'm
time.
okay to take a couple more, but if you want to. Yeah, we'll take two more.
Okay, we got one over here.
Can you talk a little bit about flexibility and mobility and how that fits into aging populations in addition to building muscle?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. So years ago when I actually owned a gym for a little bit, we traded out with these yogis. So we wanted to do a yoga class. We heard it was good, relaxation, and they wanted to come strength train. So what was amazing was they were super flexible, able to do yoga. The minute we put them under load, not a single one of them could do any type of movement to full range of motion. They couldn't squat, they couldn't do anything. They were awful. And I came and I realized pretty in short order that there's a difference between active range of motion and passive range of motion. I'm not interested in that in passive range of motion. It doesn't help me in terms of athleticism. Active range of motion, where now all of a sudden I can go to full ranges of motion under load, is how I know to drive athletic performance. Me just passively stretching is really good for calming my central nervous system, helping increase recovery in a post-workout environment. But in terms of active range of motion, the only way I do that is with some form of weights and using barbells and weights to do full range of motion movements. So me stretching and doing Ramwad or Kelly Starrett's, a lot of that stuff to me is just a way for me to cool the central nervous system and recover. But a big thing right now, people talk about tissue remodeling. It's a big one. Do you believe that rolling on a foam roller or supernova is going to remodel tissue? No. Do you know how much pressure it takes to remodel tissue? 10,000 pounds per square inch to have a 1% change in tissue quality. So how is foam rolling going to do that for me? What does foam rolling do? Relaxes my nervous system, helps me get greater range of motion, and I feel recovered, or I start feeling better, more able to train. So what I'm doing is effectively rolling and warming up the tissue, creating tactile feedback to increase circulation and increase flexibility. So there's a lot of snake oil out there right now with this whole tissue remodeling and rolling and doing this. It doesn't work like that. Tissue remodeling is hard. So I'm not a big fan of passive stretching. Active range of motion stretching, which I call lifting weights, is what I prescribe because it's the only thing that I've seen result in increased performance. Now, is going and doing yoga great? Yeah, sure. Right? It's good for relaxation. People have been doing it for 1,000 years, but there's a reason that the guy who, the hot yoga, Bikram, multiple hips replaced. So when I run into a lot of people that have done yoga for a long period of time exclusively, usually have some pretty extensive problems. Now, when they start mixing lifting weights with other forms of training and they start creating a holistic approach, we talked about, which is the least non-crazy approach, then we start looking at trying to develop this kind of model for athletic performance that looks like what? Move a little bit, develop an aerobic base, lift some weights to try to drive central nervous system efficiency, get motor units to fire, do things for relaxation, and help to calm the nervous system, eat well, sleep. I mean, all the things that our parents told us when we were kids, go to bed early, which I wish somebody would do now. Eat all your green vegetables. I mean, do all these things are all pretty accurate. There is really no magic pill, and I wish there was. I wish I could stand up here and sell you guys something and say, hey, I'll give you extreme health for $19.95 if you buy this. But that doesn't exist. There really is no magic pill. You know what the magic pill is? Consistency and opportunity and just being able to do it every single day. So, answer your question? Yeah, sure. I think we got one more. I'll answer questions after if you guys have them too.
Yeah.
So.
We'll take one more over here, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Yes, enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you.
You talked about creatine.
Yeah.
I've always heard that too much, if you're over 50, kind of promotes prostate cancer.
No.
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 Okay.
No. I mean, no, not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. There's so much misinformation about creatine, but it's pretty interesting. A lot of that stuff came out years ago. No. There are literally thousands of efficacy studies, and I'm telling you, be an early adopter on this, but don't take my word for anything. Go on. We have this magical thing called Google, where all the questions of the world are answered. And if they don't, you can email me. I have a blog. It's called Talk to Me Johnny, and the reason being is people didn't trust what they read on Google. So I have literally hundreds of people, or over the years, like hundreds of questions, where people have asked me all this stuff ad nauseum. And it's pretty accurate. Like, we did the research. We looked at literally thousands of research articles about the efficacy, and the benefits were just, to me, it doesn't make any sense why people wouldn't be taking some form of creatine. And it's just the basic creatine monohydrate, the cheapest one. What happens is the supplement companies got involved and they started creating all these different versions that were proprietary that they could jack the price up. But it turned out that just the most basic creatine monohydrate was by far the most cost effective and had the most benefit. Cool. All right.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you.
And y'all, can we show appreciation for our speaker?